Video games, for as long as they've existed, have been inseparable from music. The music evokes emotion where no emotion would be had otherwise. It hints to foreshadowing where that hinting would not exist without the music, and it is overall incredible to listen to. The music only ever adds to the overall enjoyment of the video game, and the majority of the time, the narrative itself. The music used within video games, particularly with contemporary examples, plays an important role for the narrative. Games created at the very beginning of the movement, like Tetris or Namco's Pac-Man, have been accompanied by music. Even though these early examples used chiptunes and not scores, it was still very revolutionary for the time because of the technology and skill that was used to make it possible. Even though the song or songs were looped and not often used throughout the entire game because of the lack of technology and difficult programming that it took to make those things possible for the games. The use of music within video games has been a staple since the very beginning of it all. When you look at the earliest video games, like Final Fantasy, Super Mario Bros., Kid Icarus, etc., you see the depth and complexity of the development and function of these games within the context of the time, not to mention the iconic soundtracks that were employed into these games. Nobody would enjoy playing a game like Super Mario Bros. Or Final Fantasy without the music. The soundtracks for just those two games in particular are some of the most listened to video game soundtracks throughout history, and to imagine a world without them is a sad, sad thing. Even when you look at contemporary games like Dark Souls, an RPG with very little dialogue, or Hyper Light Drifter, a game with even less dialogue, imagining these games without that continuous stream of background music would make for a very boring game. As many people know, video games were originally and solely created with the intent to entertain the player, and a majority of games' objectives are still that. But many contemporary games like Life is Strange, Gone Home, Hyper Light Drifter, Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, and Dark Souls are meant not only to entertain, but to tell a story. Take, for example, the indie game Hyper Light Drifter, a game developed by Heart Machine that was released earlier this year that was inspired by lead developer and director Alex Preston's Heart Disease. Your character, this drifter, is in a world that is quickly and maliciously turning into a wasteland, while your objective is contrarily not to save the world, but to find a cure for your sickness, an assumed heart disease. The game's plot, though not closely, mirrors Preston's own life, and that is the story Preston is trying to tell. It is something that is important to him and to the narrative, and that he believes may be important to thousands of others, and at the very least, is entertaining and enjoyable for those thousands that may not be able to relate. The music within Hyper Light Drifter is not only beautiful and nostalgic while paying homage to those classic 8-bit and 16-bit video games we all know and love, but it additionally plays a role with the narrative. With the lack of exposition through monologue or dialogue with the game's characters, the only thing that the game gives the player is the music. The rest is left for us to decipher and pick apart. The player's hand is not held by any means, which leaves the player solitary on a path that they have never been down before. Another game that leaves the player unaccompanied for the most part is Gone Home. Gone Home is a first-person video game narrative that tells the story of Caitlin Greenbrier as she returns home in 1995 from traveling Europe. She comes back to an empty house with no notes or voice messages on the answering machine to give Caitlin and the player any clue of where anyone is or what is going on. Your objective is simple. Explore the house and figure out where everyone has gone. As you explore, you discover more and more about the characters that are not physically within the game, like Sam, Caitlin's younger sister. The game has a very subtle use of music while you are searching around the house, but the not-so-subtle music is what reveals Sam's character so much. With the diegetic use of the cassette tapes within the game, both the player and Katie listen to the music that Sam has left throughout the nooks and crannies of the house. The music that is left for Katie to hear is loud, angry, and punkish, which is incredibly reflective of Sam's personality. The genre of music on the cassettes is also arguably a leitmotif for Sam's character, as it is very associative with Sam's personality and her attitude towards society. Punk music is very anti-establishment, which relates heavily to Sam's journal entries and letters to Katie because of the continuous protest of their parents and their faux authority over Sam's life. There are show posters, band buttons, and cassette cases lying all over the rooms where Sam would spend most of her time in the house, and these things reveal a lot about a character that neither the player nor the protagonist, Katie, directly interact with in-game. The music that is used within these video games has deep importance because of the obvious focus that the developers put into making the music an important aspect. I personally do not think that Heart Machine or the Fulbright Company would have created Hyper Light Drifter or Gone Home with the intention to not make the music a massive piece of the narrative puzzle within the game. If they did not want the music to be obviously crucial to the narrative or development of characters, then they would have created much more dialogue for the characters within the game. Music within video games, whether it is Hyper Light Drifter, Gone Home, Final Fantasy, or Dark Souls, has a particular purpose to the narrative storytelling that is obviously important to the creators of the game. They are telling us a story. All we need to do is listen.